Darian Husam. Rose Karlbaum. Philip Hoffman. Patricia Lundborg. Ted Maxwell. Dick DeHart. Gerda Bartlett. Doris Clement. Give us in time our portion with those who have trusted in you and sought to do your holy will. To your name, with the church on earth and the church in heaven, we ascribe all honor and glory, now and forever. Amen. A couple weeks ago, we had something happen that's kind of like the Holy Grail for parents. We had our kids, we have two of them, they both went on a double play date. So they're both gone at the same time in the afternoon. This is really, really fantastic because if you are a parent or if you remember, and if you're not, let me just tell you, to go to, let's say, dinner and a movie and pay a babysitter is approximately $4 million. And so if you get a chance to have a free afternoon, you probably do what we did, which is go to a movie. Because $4 million, right? So if you don't have to pay a babysitter, you could even splurge like we did and go see a movie in 3D. So I didn't care what we were going to see. I just like to go to the movies and eat popcorn and maybe get some candy and hang out at the movies because it's pretty great. And also, free babysitter. So we went to see Gravity. It was my husband's choice, and I figured that's fine. I might have looked at the trailer a little bit just to see what I was getting into. It looked exciting, so I figured I would go. And so we went, and I got the glasses, and I have to put them on over my glasses, so it always bugs me. So I was a little disgruntled, and there were approximately, I think, 15 previews, I'm pretty sure. I don't know how that happens. When the movie finally started, it was one of the better action movies that I've seen in a long time. Now, a few people have told me that they hated it, and that's fine. I'm a little claustrophobic, and there are parts of it that really got to me, but this movie, Gravity, was amazing. It made you, especially in 3D, it made you feel what it must have been like to be alone in space. And when we came out of it, I think I said, and my husband said, and a bunch of us said, I am never, ever, ever, ever going to space. Usually all that stuff doesn't happen when you're in space. However, in this movie, things happen to Sandra Bullock again and again and again. She's the main character, and in this movie, she is totally and completely alone. I'm not spoiling anything. You can see this in the trailer. She goes off into space and is spinning and is by herself in the middle of space. And it gives you such a terrifying and great idea of what that would be like to be completely alone and not know what to do and be looking down at the earth below you. You can't even get there. She was so totally alone. And there's a moment, and like I said, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a moment where she just gives up. This happens sometimes in action movies. This happens in this action movie, that there's a point at which she is just done. She gives up. Thing after thing after thing keeps happening to her, and like I said, there are a few plot holes. It's not the best dialogue in the world, but it's a really cool action movie. And there's a point where she just gives up. She's going to throw in the towel. She might as well die out there in space because she's so alone. So when I saw this story, I hear echoes sometimes when I see these stories in our culture of Bible stories. Because I think these stories that grab us they sort of perpetuate, even if it's the most science fiction-y movie you can imagine, there's already been a story about somebody who was so alone, they just wanted to give up and die. And that's the story of Elijah. That's where we find him today. He might as well have been lost in space like Sandra Bullock. He is so alone by himself out in the middle of the wilderness, and he gives up. He's just completely done under that tree and says, "You might as well take my life." We hear this story of being so alone. And it might resonate with you as it did with me. I get accused sometimes of saying I'm done when I can't possibly be done. Do y'all ever do this? You're at home maybe, and things keep piling up, and there's one thing after another, and maybe a parent or a child gets sick, or maybe both at the same time, and then maybe, like us last week, your dog gets sick too, and everything piles on, and things that are unimaginable for some of us, and you just say sometimes, I am done. I'm done with all this. I just want to give it up. So in the movie Gravity, when this happens, like I said, no spoilers, but there's an angel. And if you see it, it's an unlikely angel. But it's an angel that comes to her when she needs someone, when she's given up, when she's ready to just die out there in space. She's so alone. In the story of Elijah, there's an angel too. This maybe is more of a traditional angel, but who knows? Because this angel comes to Elijah when he is so alone and he's out in the middle of nowhere. He's laid down under the tree. His servant is even a day's journey away. There's nobody around. He lays down and he is ready to die. An angel comes to him and makes him pancakes. I don't know if y'all heard that, but that's what it is. If you take a cake baked on some hot stones, I would call that a pancake. So we have this angel who comes to Elijah when he's done in the middle of everything and makes him a pancake. Now Elijah is a prophet, and prophets have a rough life. Because what prophets have to do is they have to speak God's truth to the people in power. And of course, the people in power don't want to hear God's truth. They don't want to have anything to do with God's truth. Because when you hear God's truth in your life, you might have to change something. When you hear God speak the truth to you, you might have to change something you're doing in your life. And that's scary. And we don't want to do that. And in the Elijah story, there's even a wicked queen. I swear I think movies, there's nothing original ever, because there's a wicked queen in this story, and her name is Jezebel. Great name, too. There's a wicked queen named Jezebel, and she's out to get the prophet Elijah. She's worshiping this other god, and Elijah has spoken the truth to her and said, God said we should worship only God. You shouldn't worship this other god. And so to the point of killing all the other prophets, she's after Elijah. She wants to kill him. Elijah is at the bottom of the barrel. He's gone out into the middle of the wilderness. He's laid down under a broom tree. He wants to give up his life. And the angel comes and makes him pancakes. I have a long history with pancakes. Maybe you do too. My dad used to make them every Saturday morning when I was a kid, just about. So they're kind of the ultimate comfort food for me. You can look in your fridge and you can have nothing and you can still make pancakes. As long as you have eggs, some kind of milk, and some flour, you can whip up a pancake, right? And there's very little more indulgent than to have a pancake on Saturday morning, or 5 or 6, whatever works. You can make them fancy if you want, but mostly I make them like my dad did, from scratch, plain, with buttermilk, the real stuff. Pancakes are this thing that Elijah had a history with too. If you go back a few chapters, Elijah had had miracles happen to him. He's given up, but only after God had done some amazing things in his life. If you go back a few chapters, Elijah was on kind of a vision quest out in the desert. He had been doing some things, and he stumbled out of the desert, and he saw a widow gathering sticks, and he said to her, "Excuse me, ma'am, can I have something to eat?" Now, what he didn't know about the widow is that she was done. She said to him, "Listen, sir, I have nothing left. All I have is a little flour and a little oil, and I'm gathering sticks to make a fire, and I'm going to make me and my son some pancakes, and then we're going to lay down and die because we have nothing left." Talk about done. This woman is done. She's going to make herself and her young son her last meal, and she is going to give up and lay down and die because she has nothing left. So Elijah says to her again, "Ma'am, please, make me some pancakes." And it doesn't say what she wanted to say, but I can only imagine. But she went home, and so she made this meal, and this is a miracle that's not talked about a lot in the Bible, but I like to call it the miracle of the everlasting pancakes. Because not only was there enough pancakes for her and her son, there was enough pancakes for Elijah to keep them going until the famine had ended, until they had food again. The everlasting pancakes kept them going, literally saved his life. So you fast forward a few chapters, and here's Elijah again. And he's laying under the broom tree, and he's given up. He wants to just give in and die. And here an angel comes to him with what else but pancakes. You can see that maybe he saw them and maybe remembered what God had done for him in the past. You can see that maybe he thought about that widow and her son and how they lasted and kept him alive before, and they might keep him alive again. And he got up and he ate, and he ate what must have been a super pancake. I was reading this recipe in a magazine, and it has like the crazy greens in it and a scoop of protein powder, and it's supposed to be this special, awesome pancake. I like mine, like I said, indulgent, straight up. But this is supposed to keep you going if you're doing, some sort of sports, a marathon or something like that. The super pancake, and what I think Elijah ate was a super pancake, because it says it kept him going for 40 days and 40 nights on the strength of one pancake. He kept going 40 days and 40 nights. He got up out of his aloneness and kept going. In gravity, in the same way, there's just enough to keep her going to her next task. It doesn't solve everything, and God didn't solve everything for Elijah. But sometimes we get that angel, that pancake, that keeps us going. In the aloneness that Elijah had, he went to the mountain of God. And he went up to this mountain of God, and after he had been so alone that he was ready to die. And I believe even if he would have given up his life, God would have taken care of him in that moment. We've had friends and relatives that have given up their lives too soon. And I believe that God takes care of them as well and loves them. And if that would have happened to Elijah, God would have embraced him, like God does a few chapters later, collects him into God's arms when he dies. But God wasn't done yet. And so Elijah wasn't done yet. And he goes to the mountain of God, and he's waiting to see the presence of God. And God is not in the chaos. God is not in the tornado that happens and splits rocks. And God is not in the earthquake. And God is not in the fire. God is in the silence. And I wondered about that. In the movie trailer for Gravity, it says, life in space is impossible. There's no air, there's no sound, there's nothing. Life is impossible. Being that alone seems impossible. Grief is impossible. Depression like this is impossible. But what if God is there in the silence? What if God isn't there in all of those things we try to do to make ourselves feel better? What if God is there in the silence when it's so quiet that we can hear ourselves think? What if God has been there all along, when we're so quiet and so alone that we can hear our own thoughts, that we can hear that sound like in space when there's no one around? What if God occasionally appears and gives us just enough to get going? That pancake that keeps us along, that keeps us going toward our next task. But I think God is in the silence. I think God is with us when we feel so alone that we want to give up, that we want to give in. And even if we do, God is there in that silence to bring us home. Amen.